Hello, everybody, and welcome to CSA's webinar series, CSA Cloud Bytes. Today's webinar is sponsored by Orca Security and will be moderated by Orca's Elias Terman, Senior Vice President of Marketing. I'll pass it over to you, Elias.
Thanks, Brooke. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for attending the webinar, How Unity Uses Continuous Risk Assessment to Empower its Google Cloud Estate. A few housekeeping items before we start. You can enter your questions at any time during the presentation. Just use the question tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll also have time at the end for questions. You can also access this recording at any time. Just use the same link to view the webinar again or share it with a colleague. Additionally, you can find resources about Orca in the attachments section of your screen, and there's also a link to a free demo and free trial. Again, my name is Elias Terman. I'm SVP of Marketing at Orca Security, and I'll be moderating today's event. We're going to do a couple things differently than you may not have expected when you signed up for this webinar. Number one, we're not going to have any slides. So if anyone is disappointed by that, feel free to drop off the call now. No slide. The second thing we're going to do differently involves you. I really want you to ask questions at any time during the webinar, as I may pose your question live to our experts at any time. Now, let's get started by getting to know our experts. Justin, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and Unity?
Certainly. Justin Somaini. I am the current Chief Security Officer at Unity, owning both the physical security aspects as well as the cyber. I've been at Unity for a little bit over a year and a half. And helping them grow and manage cybersecurity in a incredibly agile and high growth company. Prior to that, I was the Chief Security Officer at SAP, Yahoo, Symantec, VeriSign, Schwab, and a bunch of other places. And Unity is a really interesting company. Basically, we make one of the leading real-time 3D engines for games and other different industries to utilize in representing the real world in a virtual one, whether for fun or for productivity.
Great. CJ, can you now do the same?
I'd love to. Yeah, my name is Chris Johnson, CJ. I'm a senior product manager in the cloud security team. My team looks after compliance experience on Google Cloud Platform. I've been at Google for about 5 years. Before that, I was a chief architect and have done a few startups. This is my dream job. It's been a lot of fun working at Google and working on enhancing our security, our compliance, and turning those into products that our customers can have delight in. And we love working with the team here on the phone today.
Wonderful. Alaap, your turn.
Hey, and my name is Alaap Pandit. I'm one of the SEs here at Orca, and I've been with Orca for about a year and a half now, and enjoying time with Elias and the fast growth of our company.
Awesome. So let's kick things off with Justin. Can you tell us a little bit more about Unity and kind of just give us a sense for the overall scale of your operation and the kind of the size, the magnitude of your Google Cloud estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned before, what we really are underneath the hood, or what we're known for, is creating that real-time 3D engine. But most predominantly, that has been in the gaming industry. And for me, this is my first time being in the entertainment industry, and being a longtime gamer, this is actually really exciting and fun for me. But the vast majority of mobile games and PC and console games are actually built on the Unity 3D engine. So as you can imagine, our implementation from game developers on that industry alone is in the billions of devices around the globe. But what's little known is the utility of that engine in real estate and other construction and other industries, as they try to envision digital twin, as they do visualization of the 3D world, such as creating machine learning algorithms for navigation or driving in your cars, etc. So within that, we have that engine, but really underneath the hood, we are not unlike any other SaaS provider. Many services that we provide to support the monetization, the operation, or delivery and upkeep of those games and services for our customers. And to that end, we're in multi-cloud environments, but GCP being the most predominant one for Unity, we have hundreds of thousands of assets and instances within GCP that we need to manage. And it being in a very agile and empowered business unit type of company, you can imagine there's a lot of different capabilities and flavors and implementations of applications and infrastructure along the line that we need to manage. And so it becomes a very very diverse and very a cornucopia of technologies that we need to govern, implement even the basics, vulnerability and configuration management, end-to-end across the company.
Just to
yeah, go ahead.
Chime in briefly there, Unity's story here, we're so proud to serve you and so excited to be a part of your success and your journey. Yours is not dissimilar from a lot of our customers, where what we see is a diverse set of assets that have security and compliance outcomes that have to be adapted to different environments and workloads. And this is a really common story, whether it be, taking what you have and adapting it to a new vertical or new area of the market. What you see is the compliance changes shift and change. And we've worked really hard at Google to try to make that as simple as possible. We'll go into that a little bit more in detail, but I love your story there. And that's something we see from a lot of our customers is the diversity of those security and compliance applications have to adapt to your business as you grow.
Yeah, that diversity, I'm sure presented and magnitude presented a lot of challenges. Upon arriving at Unity, Justin, were there certain like cloud security and compliance challenges that were like top of mind for you right out of the gate, or what did you kind of prioritize as you kind of came on board and took a look around and saw what you were dealing with there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we wanted to do is to have a fidelity of visibility. And what I mean by that is in any company, asset management is probably one of the most challenging and probably the least attended services and functions. But how do we get a almost 100% and a living ability for asset management? The second one, obviously, is how do we get the depth of vulnerability, configuration, associations with those assets? And for us, because of the importance of security within the company, it's not a how do we do that on a quarterly basis? How do we do that on a monthly or annual basis? But we really strive to how do we do it on a daily basis? As the attacks, and you can look at Verizon's breach report that comes out every year and how quickly attacks occur today, minute a vulnerability is released. And for us, it's a living process in a ever agile and changing business operations, which creates a massive complexity that quite honestly outstrips the third-party compliance things, whether it's PCI, et cetera, in the space, because it's our compliance expectations. And that was probably the big bar that we had to shoot for.
And was there any, I'm sorry, Alaap, did you want to jump in there?
I was just going to say, when you're talking about compliance parameters that are internal to Unity itself, could you share a little bit about, what were the difficulties that you faced when evaluating solutions, and what really compelled you to choose Orca as that tool of choice?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is breadth of services. And so like I spoke to before, we're in multi-cloud. We have about 4 cloud providers that we participate, or infrastructure as a service. But we also have our own OpenStack and other environments that we need to meet. And so we really strived as much as possible to have an ability to go end-to-end across those multi-cloud providers. And again, while GCP is the lion's share of where we're at, we didn't want to forego or exclude others as a result of that. The second thing that we really wanted to drive into was speeds. And I spoke to a little bit earlier that we wanted to get a daily or a very frequent assessment of our assets as vulnerabilities and the organizations themselves are deploying. So we had ephemeral instances being fired up, as well as accounts, if you will, and being taken down on a daily basis, monthly and quarterly basis. So that's one form of agility. But the other one was in relation to how those services are used. And how they're being applicable to the environments. And so that ability to do that very frequent, continuous assessment, if you will, was pretty strong for us. That dropped into a conversation of how do we execute on this? And for us, we took a fair amount of time of talking through agent and agentless. And this was incredibly important, as there's a lot of products and services on the market. But for us, it was a pro and con. There's no perfect answer in this. So how do we get speed of implementation to get that visibility? How do we get the fidelity of assessment? And what is the cons, if you will, in our ability to do that? And while we have agent capabilities in other assets or in other services that we do, what we found is the deployment cycle of those is pretty long for us. And then two, the ability, the integration and testing as a result of that kind of extenuated it. And so that conversation of agent and agentless, to be able to give that fidelity, speeds, and depth, was a very important conversation into that compliance. How do we meet that compliance aspect?
Thanks so much for that, Justin. I think that that's a really good place to get CJ's take and understanding a little bit of the issues that customers across GCP face. I know that that's the lion's share, given that I've worked with a number of your team in getting the Orca solution stood up. But I think that that's something to talk about as well, the speed to deployment and the trade-off. How long would it have taken you with Orca versus a competing solution? But I'll come back to that after hearing CJ's take on compliance.
Yeah, I think there's a couple issues to highlight there. Justin, I love the approach that your team has taken in terms of analyzing the speed, the deployment. But one of the issues that we run into a lot, and we've obviously seen significantly over the last year or so, is reduction of that attack surface area, especially in the form of your software supply chain. And I'll talk about that a little bit further as we get going along here. But my team works obviously with a lot of customers internationally and also especially locally for US government and so forth. And this is top of mind for my customers, which is reducing the complexity. And also there's that impact of speed to deployment. But yeah, the issue that we run into is simplification of that software supply chain and reducing that attack surface area. Really makes a big difference for those compliance outcomes and reduces your compliance boundary that you have to keep track of. This is such an important topic for your regulators, for your auditors, for your customers. And even as you're talking, as Justin, you were talking about kind of evolution towards becoming software as a service. Now you have other companies depending upon your supply chain and everything else that you have, which means by simplifying that, as you go through your audit to help them become successful, you can accelerate those customers of yours and you can be more successful down the line there. So it speeds up your business, makes it a lot easier to take care of those customers, and greatly reduces that complexity of the software supply chain.
That's great. Actually, thank you for the folks that are putting in questions into the chat. I appreciate that. I have one. I'm going to direct this one at you, CJ. An audience member is asking, how does Google Cloud address data residency and other geo-specific compliance mandates? So this makes me think of things like, I guess, GDPR and things like that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one that we've really been looking at aggressively over the last couple of years. I mean, the first thing to understand is that Google does supply a series of very strong data residency controls in a lot of our products. And a lot of our customers are able to take advantage of that to achieve compliance outcomes. This is also important to think of in relation to my previous comments around understanding your compliance boundary and thinking about that. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. But really, the answer here is the way we approach it is we allow our customers to apply what we call an org policy, which allows us to configure inside of the environment the regions in which you're going to use your data and use your environment. And it restricts your data to those areas that you want it to exist in. This helps our customers achieve those compliance outcomes, but we see this happening globally, not just in Europe, but it's important in US, our customers in the Asia Pacific region, Customers want their data to be regional, both for compliance purposes, a lot of times for performance purposes in terms of tuning what they need to achieve, and Google Cloud offers some great solutions to that effect. And we've got some new products in this area as well, and the coverage of those data residency org policies is always expanding.
That's great. What CJ, what's the best place for people to go to if they want to learn more about like security and compliance around Google Cloud? Is there a certain part of your website or blog that you recommend that people should follow, or follow you maybe?
That sounds scary. No, yeah, the website has some great resources. Obviously, my baby's so cute in the compliance area, so cloud.security.com/security/compliance there. And you can check out those areas. That has, of course, the compliance offerings, the reports manager, and some other self-service capabilities. The security blog and the announcements there, we're constantly, out there in the industry talking about what we're doing both for our customers in Google Cloud, but also just broadly the research that we're doing and contributing to the community. This is happening daily. And of course, you're happy to check out some of the stuff that I post there, but really the broader team does a much better job than what I'm doing there. So I'd encourage you to check out the security website, the compliance website, the Google Cloud blog is heavy on security content. And then of course, the rest of the research that we're constantly publishing to industry is something that we're really proud of. I love being a part of that team. It's really exciting to see what we're able to contribute there.
That's awesome. Maybe what we'll do as a follow-up to people on the webinar, we'll send you links to those resources that CJ just mentioned. Justin, I'd like to turn it back to you for a second. One common thread that we're seeing across Orca Security's customer base is, everyone's doing custom app development on top of public cloud platforms, software and platform engineering. They're pushing code at breakneck speeds. They're trying to innovate, better serve customers, beat the competition. They've obviously gotten more power, rightly so, in this environment. How does infrastructure security, get functions like DevOps to do what you need them to do in order to, protect the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that is not unique to Unity, but almost every company around the globe, which is, how do you drive security into other organizations as they are highly focused on delivering their functionality, services, products, or goals and deliverables? And so when we look at the engineering, or more specifically the DevOps teams, you can take two approaches, carrot or stick. We took a very strong carrot approach, which is very much part of the Unity culture, but I think a lot more lasting as time goes on. And so by bringing solutions to market or to bear within the company itself that also solved their problems and created value to what they are trying to do, was very self-serving, but also very serving to the company as a whole. I spoke a little bit earlier around asset management and how it's complex. That was one of the areas where Orca was able to really deliver. For the first time, we were able to identify in-depth assets across the deck, and even asset types within instances and containers, et cetera, as it deconstructs accounts, software on top of that instance, et cetera, and bring that to bear with a fidelity and integrity, because it's running almost every day, to those DevOps teams that they can better manage and operationalize their functionality. The second one that it did is, security historically has always, identified problems as solutions and then told other people what to do. DevOps teams or operational teams historically has been the destination of those problems. So our ability to integrate with the ticketing systems that they use versus yet another system that security is forcing them to use, driving that in their existing processes, inside of their tools and technologies, and inside their existing workflow, again, not only was very self-serving for security to get the destination of patching, configuration changes, and things along those likes. But it diluted this conversation of, here's my DevOps job, and then there's this security job that is being forced upon me. It becomes one and the same. And so for that, we were seen really as partners and really as collaborators through this entire process that won us a lot of credibility and goodwill, and ultimately, speeds in solving the problems across the company.
So no more.
Justin, I got to chime in here because I've worked with many customers across Orca, similar to your size. The adoption rate was insane. I was with some of your team members, and I'd expect to have 2 or 3 folks that I was working with. Then it turned into 10 and then 20. And it's like various business units were just itching to get their hands on Orca and access to it because there's something that they wanted that Orca would be able to provide them that they otherwise were struggling in order to get. Similar to what you said, that friction was immediately removed. It's not just that frictionless onboarding experience, but then it's also the friction between intra-organizational complexities is removed as well, right?
And we took what I would say a longer path of deployment than what was needed. So I believe we were planning a 12-month. We shortened it down to 5 months. But in hindsight, we could have gotten it done in a couple of weeks. And so that longer deployment was to build those partnerships or relationships and that touchy-feely softiness by enrolling them into this. And at the end of the day, I'm very happy that we did that because the goodwill and the credibility actually is, you can't put a price tag on it.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear CJ's take on this because, you always have to get the buy-in from other BUs, and it's a trade-off of, do I want them to focus on these efforts, and what do I lose if I don't get this done, and what am I going to need to ask them for or do for them in return if I ask them to do this? With Orca, just works, and so it was more of just evangelization of Orca across the Unity org. CJ, how do you think Orca would fare in regard to other GCP customers, as we already have, and how are you seeing it and how are you hearing about it in the field?
Yeah, the core value here, which is simplicity of deployment, right? And making it something that works very rapidly is so important, right? So a lot of my job is working inside of Google Cloud to convince teams to do something for me from a security aspect, kind of like what you were talking about, Justin. But Google's a very meshy organization, as you may have read about, and convincing, somebody from one of the other teams to do my bidding for security outcomes isn't so simple, right? And having a tool or a capability that provides value almost immediately without having me requiring me to change how I do my daily job, right, is so important. It makes it so easy to get new tools into production, and really simplifies the deployment there. And especially when you're talking about something like a multi-cloud deployment, like you've spoken about, Justin, and a lot of our other customers, that's so important. All of our customers are multi-cloud at some level, and they're always going to be. And I think that's a healthy thing. We'd like to see that ecosystem. We enjoy having a competitive marketplace there, and it pushes us all to try harder. But yeah, I think having that simplified deployment that allows teams to adopt quickly, without having to change my deploy or build chain, super important, and allows customers to adopt rapidly. And it makes that horizontal evangelism effort that a lot of us have to go through when we're working with a large, complex organization a lot easier. And Justin, I'm sure you experienced it as well. You probably got half a dozen teams with some really awesome, smart people that have done great work, that have strong opinions, right? And making sure that they're going to be successful without having to change their business model significantly is, I think, one of the core values that Orca can help with.
Yeah, I think strong opinions is one of Unity's core values, actually. In all seriousness, joking aside, all seriousness, it is one of the things that is hard to wrap your arms around, but so critically important. Having those voices, those opposing opinions, much to your multi-cloud statement, at the end of the day, it only makes us stronger and better, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. And they're speaking from an area of experience and actual knowledge, so it's fantastic to hear. So it's great.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing that comes to mind there, sorry if I can't, Elias, is there's many teams, and I think the interesting problem that was not really an issue at all with Orca is how do we give the right access to the various personnel across each of the respective teams? Because within each respective team, there'll be also siloed groups of folks that should have access to accounts, A, B, and C, but then the other group may not have access to account A, but only B and C. And then getting into more detail, right? It gets complicated really quick. But we were able to offer a RBAC natively out of box within Orca solution, so you can configure it there, or you can integrate it with a popular SSO solution like G Suite or Okta or many others as well, really.
Yeah, what comes to mind there, and this is one of the things I talk to my customers a lot about, is the security of their security, right? And I mean, I don't want to pound the supply chain thing too long, but like even before this got popular, we had a lot of conversations about the security of the security, right? And I think, one of the things that at Google we go through a lot is, our security assessment of anything that's going to be anywhere near our environment. And speaking to our earlier conversation of the horizontal adoption, that's one of the things that stops us in our tracks, is if we can't get past that. But if we're having to do that 25 different times for a different component or product, it makes it really hard to use that and push that into our horizontal teams. So doing that centrally and doing that one time versus 30, 40, 50 times really simplifies things, and also again helps us with the security of our security. So I think this is a good thing for you to be, talking to your customers about and really working through.
I don't think the supply chain topic is, overused yet. I think it's really still top of mind for everybody in cyber, but also it's becoming more widely adopted across just mass like retail, if you will. And a good example would be like, last year, I noticed it a number of times with some customers. There was a malicious NPM package that had malware embedded within it. And so, tens of thousands of machines just went and auto-updated. And then now I just have malware distributed across all of my resources, but I got it from the legitimate source. And so what do I do then? How do I protect myself? And how do I have scope of coverage here? It's difficult, right? That's where we talk about supply chain. And I think the main reasons I see customers choosing Orca, and Justin, this is why we're lucky to have you here right now, is just to get your take on this. There's really three main factors. It's the coverage. So does it support all of the resources within my environment? So not just talking about the Google Compute Engines, but also the Azure VMs, the AWS EC2 instances, but then also the containers and Kubernetes, both the ones that I manage and deploy on my own, but the managed service offerings from the cloud providers too, such as GKE and CJ. I'll love for you to talk about that in a bit. And many others. So coverage, the context. You've said this a number of times, different ways, Justin, which is the high fidelity alerts that Orca issues. And then the last thing would be comprehensive, because you're able to have CSPM detections and capabilities. Orca offers 35 plus compliance frameworks out of box, and that's just for right now, by the way. It's going to be a lot more. We offer CWPP, malware. It's like the list goes on. So like everything is available within this tool. Are these the main reasons that drove you to Orca, if you had to sum it up so far?
Yeah, I think the frameworks, Unity being in the entertainment industry is not a financial services or a healthcare instance. We do have PCI and obviously SOX being a public company. The bar of security, in absence of both of those, is really to the level of where we see the threat impacting our customers and creators, our creators. And because of the volume of our quote unquote end network, of those billions of devices, we take that very, very seriously. How do we drive that? And so that bar is pretty high. And so for us, the compliance aspect, even though we pinge to a NIST FedRAMP moderate as our 303 or so controls enterprise-wide that we're driving in, and we need that for internal framework representation on our maturity of security, the regulatory, quote unquote, industry compliance is fairly, is there, but not as large as others. But for us, it was speeds and feeds, and that fidelity across the deck was incredibly important to us. And then secondarily, our ability to be use that and be so deeply integrated with the people that were actually asking to do massive amounts of work across the company. And so that was really important for us to be able to be a agile security team, not a waterfall kind of model in an agile world, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I think the audience might be thinking what I'm curious about as well. You mentioned that you were a video game company. You work with many popular video games. I won't say, you can if you are okay with that, but you can't really afford to have a specific amount of downtime. You have to plan for that. And going with competing solutions would de facto create some type of impact or potential impact for the resources that are responsible for the apps that you serve your customers, right?
Yeah, I mean, the big debate that I was referring to earlier, and it wasn't really a big debate, but it was more of a thought process, is agentless. And for us, it wasn't as much downtime versus speed to deployment. We needed the visibility. We needed the integrity to be able to action quickly. I can't wait 2 to 3 years to get an agent deployed across my environment. And it's not the ability to deploy that agent. It's the QA, the testing, the load balancing with all of the teams across the company that creates a challenge. And so for us, it was the Orca was able to bring that to the table. The impact of failure would be, sure, we can make a nice little, kind of visual that Justin's not able to play his game on his mobile phone. However, in reality, this is a very large industry, a very large business that many, many people are dependent upon. And we take that seriously. And the ability for people, especially during times of COVID, to enjoy games as a stress relief is also a very nice added benefit that we take to heart. So it's really important for us to really embody that.
Thank you for choosing Orca and letting everybody play video games.
I got another question in from the audience. Thank you, audience, for continuing to put questions into that box. Someone is asking, do customers need to use different configurations or endpoints for compliant workloads? I'm going to, maybe CJ, you could take a crack at this one.
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting question. It's one of the things that's a little bit different about how Google Cloud approaches security and compliance, which is working to supply consistency, right? We don't want to require our customers to have different configurations for different compliance outcomes where possible. And Justin, this is our attempt to serve you in what you were talking about earlier around, having different parts of your business, the consumer side as well as the business side, and having different compliance outcomes for each of those. We want it to be as simple and cost effective as possible to run, let's say, a PCI or maybe a FedRAMP workload alongside maybe your consumer workload that has different compliance requirements for each of those. It should be the same. And also similarly from an encryption perspective, we believe that if you need to have, for example, FIPS 140-2 or -3 validated crypto, you shouldn't have to have a different load balancer endpoint, security configuration for that. You should have that on by default for everything that you do, so that you don't have to, have a different supply chain for each of those compliance outcomes or different workloads. So that's kind of the view from a Google Cloud perspective. I know for some of our peers, that's a little different. And I think it's an important consideration as you're looking for multi-cloud, like what are your compliance outcomes that you're shooting for? And how do you ensure that, you create those or use your environment correctly to do that? But from Google's perspective, we're working really hard to try to make that as simple as possible. But it's definitely a consideration in multi-cloud, and be careful and make sure you're using those configurations properly for your compliance outcomes.
Yeah. Also, anecdotally, one of the interesting things for us as we deploy Orca, that gave us a visibility of where our problems and things we need to work on. And what we found in the Google landscape is it was a lot better than we expected. Because of that Google involved management of those images, GKEs and the like, where we found significant benefits. So on behalf of all of us over here, especially for me and my role, thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that. I'll pass it on to the team, and we are so happy that we're helping.
CJ, you mentioned the word, be careful. for those that are migrating to GCP or planning a major scale up, are there many specific design or compliance issues or best practices that you think should be top of mind for those that are like maybe planning to go big with Google Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, consistency is key in my mind, and actually the abilities that Orca talks about, in terms of understanding your inventory, understanding your estate, and driving towards, as much of a homogeneous infrastructure as you can, so that it can be ephemeral, so that it can come and go as you need, is really important. And that's been one of the things that we've seen as well. I talk about like securing your supply chain. In my mind, a lot of the times that has to do with simplifying your supply chain and removing as many components as you can, whether that be agents or operating systems or just diversity of those components makes it really hard. So you have to secure it, but you also have to simplify it. And that's also been one of our approaches as we've looked at the security and compliance problem at scale in Google, is making sure that we have homogeneous controls that are applied to our global estate. And we're not doing kind of one-offs for different regions or anything like that. We think that's scary and risky. We want to simplify that and make it a little bit easier. Incidentally, like we've seen this really pay off recently, where we've had some customers just in the last week or so that have been responding to international events and having to scale up their infrastructure and adjust their compliance boundary to serve, different portions of the globe without having to sacrifice their security as a result of that. And we're able to do that with that simple configuration, that consistent configuration that allows us to parameterize the compliance outcomes instead of having to like redeploy a stack or, have to configure a whole new thing. It should be configuration oriented instead of bespoke to the region of the compliance that you're after.
So you're talking a lot about compliance, and as a reminder for the audience, it's because CJ is leading the PM efforts for all of Google Cloud compliance. So that's pretty daunting task. So kudos to you, CJ. Why would customers?
Why would probably broad my answer?
Yeah, and Zoom thing. Why would customers want to talk about Orca? Why would they look at Orca if Google is doing such a great job of offering compliance? The ex-Symantec CISO and current Unity CISO is saying thank you because it makes his job easier. Just your offerings out of box. So if I was listening to this right now and hearing the man who created it, why would I even look at anything besides just what you offer out of box?
Oh, you have to have more than what we offer out of the box. Now, one of the things that we've been doing at Google is trying to shift from a shared responsibility to a shared fate model. And instead of, kind of pushing everything onto the customer, we want to be part of those outcomes, but we can't do it all. Like there's absolutely no way that we can do 100% of what's required to achieve security and compliance outcomes. There's always going to be responsibilities of the customer. Justin, we don't know what operating systems you're running. We don't know what packages you're deploying or your inventory for that matter. Only you can know that. Only you should know that, right? And Orca and the security ecosystem that works in that is always going to have a critical role to play. Now, as a cloud provider, we're going to work to like make that as simple as possible. We're going to try to give as many controls as we can and really solidify that environment. But those compliance outcomes are always going to be around the customer, and there's always going to be a role for Orca and similar tools to play in that marketplace. Because at the end of the day, Justin, we don't have your PCI certification, you do. We don't have your FedRAMP certification, you do. And we want to get as fast and simple and cheap as possible to get there. Like we're really passionate about doing that, but we can't do it for you. And that's where this relationship is important, and where Orca can play a role.
Yeah, and I think when I hear, I'm a former auditor, and so I apologize to everybody on the call who's been one. And so when I take the word compliance, it really breaks down into three different areas: legal compliance, various jurisdictions around the globe. Second, customer-oriented contractual things, and that's industry like PCI as well. And then lastly, what are the security expectations, the things that we state, which is usually a bar higher, whether it's around crypto or other things that we need to really deliver for that shared fate, which is a secure and vulnerability and attack-free kind of environment. That's how I define compliance. And in that, while we chose NIST FedRAMP Moderate as our framework, moving from CSF into FedRAMP Moderate, those issues that we need to be aware of and manage are up and down the OC stack. And that is not the purview of one entity. It's a shared accountability and relation in this supply chain, if you will, multi-tenancy and IaaS-based utility. And so having those capabilities that you bring to the table doesn't forego our ability to manage it up and down the stack, because I own the PCI. I own the security aspects of this, as you so aptly put. And so it is very important that we have the tools and capabilities that allow us to go wide and deep to represent that age-old question for us is, are we quote unquote secure or not?
That's great.
I'm still interested in the shared faith model. I'd love to hear about that more later, TJ.
Shared faith or fate?
I don't remember. I couldn't hear what he said. I was fascinated.
Shared fate.
Okay, all right, that would be better.
Shared faith sounds a little scary, but yeah, shared fate.
I've got another question from the audience. Okay, other infrastructure as a service visibility tooling has had issues with GCP throttling API requests, and doesn't this get and so this doesn't allow for complete coverage of all resources. How does Orca address this issue? I don't know what GCP does in terms of throttling API requests, or if that's true. I mean, you might be able to talk to that one, CJ, and then Alaap, you can talk about maybe how we address that issue, if it is an issue. Yeah,
I'll let CJ go first.
I mean, we need to obviously be aware and be careful of that, right? We don't want to see, tools and actually it's one of the things that we kind of tackle ourselves, which is scanning or, running an inventory of a state, especially from, an outside perspective, can be a destructive action, right? So we need to be careful that that's not the case. And there's always going to be a balance there, right? We need to be aware that anytime that we're doing external scanning like this, it can be a destructive or could potentially create outages as a result of that. So we work to try to ensure that our customers can be successful and not create outages as a result of that. So that's really the objective here, is to make sure that we're finding that balance and making sure that it can work. Obviously, you can work with us and we can work to resolve some of those issues as we come across those. But I also think that some of the tooling and some of the capabilities that we see from an inventory perspective and some of the efficiency that the Orca tool brings can help work around some of those. So I'll let you guys talk to that, but certainly from a Google perspective, we want to work with you and make sure that that this is done appropriately, that we balance it appropriately, and that our goal is both keep you secure and also keep you online and not have destructive scanning capabilities and things like that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. We also do similar measures internally at Orca for the solution that we're providing to our customers. Naturally, it's a difficult task to achieve and a fine line between just enough, making enough API calls versus not, making too many, so that way we reach an outage or downtime. And, we do our best, and there are cases, but we have metrics in place in order to start backing off based on the last time, if at all ever, we ended up hitting that threshold or getting throttled. And I've only heard this a handful, less than 5 fingers, from the hundreds of customers that I've worked with and the dozens that are currently paying customers like Unity.
And aren't we a little less dependent on that, though, Alaap, at Orca, because we do most of what we do, we're doing out of band? Is that a fair statement as well, with side scanning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's a fair statement. We do provide a lot of reprieve to cloud environments that the customers are responsible for managing on their own, especially because we don't have to have something that's specifically running and pulling from the API possibly more than once, if not multiple times. Okay.
Justin, earlier you mentioned that you now have like this deep all-knowing cloud asset inventory and configuration management. How is this helping you unlock new enterprise-wide capabilities? Is this enabling other types of capabilities across the enterprise for you?
And of course, I'm sure that once I get off this call, because you might have jinxed me now that we have a all-knowing Sauron, if you will, over there. But something, of course, is going to happen. No, I mean, yes, absolutely. When we talk about the concept of asset management, not to just keep harping on that one, but it is pretty much the testament of time, if you will, that has opened up the doors for our ability to appropriately labor load from on an annualized basis. What is the growth increase of businesses and their assets in relation to not only technology, if we wanted to do a cost chargeback model, which is kind of next level financial maturity for security, but what is the labor component in association with that? So as we do an ROI or a cost analysis of security, what is the full spectrum of that cost as we include other participants like DevOps teams and the like? You know, we can track that now with the Jira tickets. How many hours do they spend on security issues? Whereas historically, they might have been project oriented and not well tracked, to say the least. You know, moving on over to that is what is the true variance of our technologies? You know, every company, there's a certain degree of, we know about X, but there's an unknown Y. Now we can give a fidelity of, we pretty much know all the different asset types that we have that allow us to go into maybe vendor management in a lot better ways. If we're talking about operating system costs and the like, or our ability to drive into skill set loading and reduction of redundancies within organizations. So for example, if we have multiple BUs that are dealing with a technology and operationally managing it discreetly unto themselves, now we can ask why. Should we create centralized services for that technology to benefit the multiple BUs and drive higher capabilities within that? And so this conversation, just by bringing transparency to what we have, unlocks a better utility of how we manage our environments for the betterment of all of us. And while it's a very simple concept of asset management, it kind of changes, it breaks down the walls between organizations and brings data to the conversation of how do we be better and faster and effectively more agile in that process.
And I'm assuming part of being better means faster time to remediation. Is
Absolutely.
that? Yeah. Can you kind of click down on that a little bit? Maybe how Orca Security helps, or just in general how you're doing remediation.
Yeah, we do, you know, not unlike all other security teams, we are overtaxed on labor. You know, we don't have enough people, and our mindset is we will never have enough people. And taking the company stance, not unlike any born in the cloud type companies nowadays, how do you drive deep automation into that process? Some of it is, how do I secure by default that CJ was talking about, by building those instances and being at ITIL redundant across the environment. But it also goes into how do we enable those various teams that actually have to do labor, do it faster, easier, and effectively cheaper along the way. So how do we assess more frequently to be able to get those tickets into the right hands with better fidelity of data? And this is one I haven't really talked about, but I'll hit in a minute. But that fidelity is incredibly important to make sure we get the right ticket with the right information to the right people the first time, so that then they can take action on it as expected. Historically, for the past 20 some odd years that we've been doing this basic config and vuln management, false positive rates. Oh, it's going to the wrong organization. Hey, within this asset, there are 3 different operational owners, you know, at the application, the infrastructure, et cetera level. How do we do nuanced operational ownership to that and get it to the right person? Those things have kind of gone away. What end result is, we get faster remediation. And so those criticals are actually meeting the timeframes that we need. Even those mediums and lows are actually getting remediated a lot faster than what we have traditionally seen in the industry. And that, at the end of the day, that means really costly and experienced individuals can spend more time creating value to our creators than pushing a patch or changing a configuration, if you will. So it's really beneficial for us.
Yeah, and it sounds like Orca was a big part of that. Was there any other results that you would like to highlight in terms of your investment with Orca, maybe both from a security engineering standpoint as well as just, organizational?
Yeah, I mean, I hit on this before in regards to the goodwill. I can't tell you, security people coming into the room are like principals and dentists. Everybody knows that they need you, but don't necessarily really want you in the room. So when we're bringing things that are going to say, yeah, but it's not going to be as painful as maybe what you experienced in the past. We can get this into your workflow system automatically. We can actually get the fidelity of data to be accurate the first time, not the second, third, or fourth time. So you don't have to deal with this as much. You can just solve the problem and move on with your day. Those are the things that, at the end of the day, not only had the other individuals across the company go, fantastic, this is good because I don't have to waste my time, but they also walked away with the security team itself values their time, values their brain power that they apply to things, and took the time to try to find a solution to meet both goals. And that enabled them to say, hey, we want to work with you more. We want to open up more about other problems. We want to be more strategic about future-oriented things that we've been saying that we'd wanted to do for quite a long time. And so it's been great on that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like kind of the nirvana dynamic that you want with those folks. I mean, do you find now that they're actually coming to you, and saying, hey, I've been thinking about this security issue? I mean, is it like, because usually they're like, oh, no. Are they coming back? Are you coming to you now with ideas?
Yeah, they are. And one of the things that we're pushing and have been pushing forward is, the concept of zero trust, which is great buzzword, but a lot of work underneath the hoods, up and down that stack. And I got to be honest, it is not fraught with challenges for other teams. But because of our approach and our delivery, we are now seeing those teams into the conversation, solutioning it themselves, because we're philosophically aligned on how we want to approach and resolve problems across the company.
Yeah, I applaud your effort there, Justin. I know, at Google, obviously I kind of joke around that we saw that band before they were popular, but we know what a journey it is, right? We've been on this journey for 11 years and it continues today. So it's a big undertaking, and I applaud your work there. And I also like what you said around like it being an approach, a philosophy, and a way of thinking, not necessarily a solution. This is something that I see some of the confusion in the industry, a lot of my customers getting tripped up on, which is like, I want to buy the zero trust thing. Like, there's a lot of tools you can buy that lead to zero trust outcomes, but you're not going to buy the zero trust thing. It's going to be how you change your business, how you operate differently, how you think about security differently. And I really like what you're saying there. It's such an important thing, and it is kind of buzzwordy right now for sure, especially with the executive order and a lot of the work that's triggering out there in the industry. But it is really a very important philosophy to think about and start to adopt across a lot of the systems and tools, and a big part of all of my customer security architecture that they should be thinking about moving forward.
That's great. I have another question from the audience member. This is awesome. Thank you, audience members, for continuing to put questions in. This person's asking, how does Orca handle GKE? So Google Kubernetes Engine. How does Orca handle GKE clusters behind load balancers? I'm going to toss that one to you a lot, but
maybe I'm not muted now.
Good.
So we handle GKE clusters the same as we handle other Kubernetes clusters, whether it's EKS or AKS, or even the Kubernetes clusters that you manage and deploy on your own. Like everything else, we're going to provide security findings that are raised by Orca, but just like happy customers like Justin have mentioned, Orca provides high fidelity alerts. And so what that means is that the alerts the Orca solution issues are prioritized by what's most likely to get you breached first. Just because there is a GKE cluster with many vulnerabilities that have a CVSS of 9 or 9.5 or higher, does that necessarily mean that it needs to be put at the highest parameter? No, absolutely not. It depends on the context. So the second part of your question is regarding load balancers. If it's fronted by a load balancer, that's something that's taken into consideration as part of the prioritization and severity for the alerts Orca issues to the customer. We build a attack vector map. And so what that attack vector map is, it's exactly kind of what it sounds like. It's pretty cool. And it gives you just the exact highlighted path from a public perspective all the way through where it needs to go in order to actually reach that machine. And so even if you had like a proxy like Cloudflare and then a load balancer fronted in front of that GKE cluster, we would show a visual and consider all of that prior to issuing an alert. And CJ, I wanted to get your take on that too, because I'm sure other customers or people here right now are curious, from a insider at GCP.
Yeah, the approach that you're taking there makes a lot of sense to me, and really the thought process around taking a look at GKE and the resources running there. One of the things that stands out, and I kind of talked about this earlier, is the importance of that context awareness, right? And what that means for prioritizing and responding to those alerts as they come up. This is an area that really resonates well, right? And also kind of speaks to what you can inherit from a cloud provider or implement yourself if you're running your own Kubernetes cluster, for example. But I think the approach makes a lot of sense, and that context awareness is key, right? Because some of these things just don't matter in the context of a cloud provider. You don't want to be spending your time chasing those down. And other ones really do matter, and you should be spending some time and effort on those. And I think that's one of the areas that the tool really stands out.
Awesome, cool. Brooke, I see that you hopped back into the show here. I know we only have a few minutes. I feel like we could go on and on, but I know we only have a few minutes left here. Did you want to close it out? Well, let's see. We got one more question here. Let's see if we can get it in. That just came in. What is a typical cost, money, time, planning for a team size of about 20 developers, agile already? I don't know if anyone can answer that, but that seems like I don't know if anyone got an answer for that one. But maybe we'll have to take that one offline and get back to you on that one. Whoever asked that question. Brooke, did you want to kind of close it out here? The last couple of minutes.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Orca, and thank you, Justin, Alaap, and Christopher, for presenting. This was a great discussion, and we really appreciate the insights that you provided. Down below the presentation screen, you'll find a tab to rate the webinar. Please review today's webinar so we know what content you're enjoying and also what formats you're enjoying. Right next to it, you'll also find additional resources from Orca from today's webinar that you can download. If you have any additional questions, please email the Cloud Security Alliance research team at research@cloudsecurityalliance.org, and I can connect you with today's presenters. The recording of this webinar will also be available within minutes of the conclusion. You can just use the same link to rewatch or share it with your colleagues. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Okay. Bye.